Welcome to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm your host, David Nolan. Today, I'll be talking with Robert Eaton, who specializes in the life and health practice areas. He is, most recently, the author of The Future is Here, an article on artificial intelligence which appeared in Contingencies magazine and is available at contingencies.org. We will be discussing artificial intelligence at our annual meeting, Envision Tomorrow in November. Find out more at actuary.org. Robert, welcome to Actuary Voices.
David, thanks so much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Robert, and your role with the Academy.
Sure. Thanks, David. I'm a principal and consulting actuary. I work mostly in life insurance and long-term care insurance. Those are my primary disciplines and areas of expertise. I've done quite a lot of work with the American Academy of Actuaries over the past 5 or 6 years, volunteer work, including helping out with certain papers, long-term care, reduced benefit options, working on the combination product valuation practice note in 2022, and working on Dorothy Andrew and Dave Sandberg, some of my volunteer friends, their data as an asset working group, as well as I've been a speaker at some Academy events, and I've written a lot for the Contingencies magazine. So really appreciate all the work that the Academy does.
Well, we very much appreciate your role in it. Contingencies is an important outlet for us. No less important than the practice notes and the issue briefs and so on, but certainly it's the most public-facing outlet. And we get a lot of kudos for the work that we put and our volunteers put into that magazine. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, why you became an actuary, and what led you here, basically.
Sure. I grew up in Florida and was fairly kind of mathematical in middle school and high school, and in college I majored in industrial engineering and mathematics. And like a lot of actuaries, had an accidental brush with insurance when my friend's father suggested I take actuarial exams, and that's how I kind of got started in the profession, getting a job with my company out of college. And I've been practicing, in health and life and long-term care since about 2004. I've been an actuary.
Right. And what do you find personally fulfilling about being an actuary? Because, to be honest, to a lot of people from the outside, they see actuaries as number crunchers. We know that there's an awful lot more to it. So could you give us some anecdotes that show why you find it so personally fulfilling?
It's really deep, David. The notion that we get to help create a set of products and even an environment and a landscape that help people live their lives with less risk, that help them live their lives with more mental well-being. The products that we create, life insurance, annuities for retirement income, long-term care insurance, health insurance, property and casualty. These are products that people rely on, for when things go bad. And, we shouldn't take for granted that the work that we do makes a big difference in people's lives every day, even if they don't see it. And even if, sometimes it comes out as a premium rate increase on a particular product when it really comes down to it and there's an emergency and a disaster, oftentimes the products that we've created are someone's best friend,
That's right. And there's a former board member, Audrey Halverson, for the Academy. Her father actually was one of the early presidents, William Halverson. And she was on the board when I first joined the Academy. And she said to me, even if you don't know it, there are likely at least 5 actuaries in your life, and possibly even more. And that you really do have to live completely off the grid, not to be affected in some way by the work of an actuary.
It's absolutely true. I mean, the core level on on a U.S. nationwide basis, for instance, CMS, work with Medicare and health insurance, world or nationwide. Social Security actuaries help us all kind of plan for retirement, and there's a lot of catastrophic funds set up, and actuaries kind of help all of those things.
Absolutely, yeah. And when it breaks down as it has on occasion. I read this morning a long piece in the Washington Post about Florida homeowners insurance and the problems that homeowners are having getting insurance and so on. And that's when it really does impact. You notice it when it's not there rather than when it is.
It's I live in Florida, so that's particularly salient, David. And I own a home, and I understand kind of that pain from a homeowner's perspective. I certainly also understand the insurer's perspective. And frankly, we live in a global economy for insurance, and hurricanes like Ian that came through, the Sarasota, kind of Fort Myersy area last year up the southwest coast of Florida, those reverberate and have impacts, worldwide. And so, and then in particular, back in Florida. So insurance markets are tough to get right, especially in interesting situations like we have in the southeast.
Absolutely, yeah, and yes, they certainly do come under scrutiny when a major disaster like a hurricane happens.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk mostly about artificial intelligence. You've written about that subject, so I was wondering if you could start by giving us a primer on artificial intelligence, what it is, what it isn't.
Sure. It's a word that's probably not very well defined. I think, as a direct answer, David, I think of machine learning when I think of artificial intelligence, the idea that you could create a model that ingests data and is able to kind of build upon itself and kind of adjust its parameters and give us new outputs for new inputs without much human assistance. So the history, though, I think of artificial intelligence. I've been doing a fair amount of reading. I'm no expert, but I understand goes back, before Alan Turing into the 1940s when we envisioned kind of machines doing work for us, and that's progressed, for the last 7-8 decades to where we are today. And my understanding, there's been many periods where the hype has sort of fallen off, and many where it's sort of resurged. We're probably in one of those resurgent periods today, and certainly the technology always builds on itself. It never kind of recedes. So um, I think we've had a variety of instantiations of artificial intelligence and what that's kind of meant for particular periods in time. And we live in a particularly interesting period right now.
I agree. Yeah. So I was going to ask whether there's sort of a straight line from the handheld calculator through to where we are today. But as you say, there are periods of not regression, but more fallow periods, and then very lush periods.
I've seen them called the AI winters, when there's just not a lot of like rapid progress, or maybe rapid public progress should be how we phrase it. But this is not one of those times.
Speaking more broadly, first of all, and then we'll get to the actuarial profession. But what do you see as the main benefits of AI as we understand it today?
I really enjoyed what Mark Andreessen, one of the venture capitalists of Andreessen Horowitz, wrote only a few weeks ago. So this was after I wrote the article for Contingencies about the benefits of intelligence more broadly. I think we all recognize, David, you and I are using these machines with microprocessors, talking on these devices that didn't exist only 5 or so years ago. The benefits of intelligence have brought us, they brought us public goods, they brought us private markets, and booming civilization. Over the last 100 or 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, where we get the benefit of all of the advancements in technology and intelligence that have come from other people. We get to share in those through kind of our global economic system and our all the ways that we learn from each other. So, given that intelligence generally seems to be a real big boon for humans, it seems to lift our standard of living. it seems to help us in many cases become better versions of ourselves and allow us to thrive and flourish. It seems like adding more intelligence, even if it's artificial intelligence, adding more intelligence and maybe intelligence that's sort of cheaply obtained is going to be really beneficial for us all.
Obviously, we know that you're an actuary, and I'm particularly interested in the benefits you see for the actuarial profession in the current generation of AI.
So the ways actuaries use artificial intelligence today, there's a handful of use cases. I think we found both, across disciplines. So, um, fraud detection models, pricing, analysis of healthcare claims. These sorts of practices use models that I would call machine learning type models, gradient boosting machines, and generalized linear models that help us find correlations in a lot of data, ones that we probably wouldn't have found through other methods. We can communicate the results of some of these models using tools like the Shapley additive value, and see how much any kind of given parameter contributes to our overall results. Machine learning and artificial intelligence is used today in actuarial science and in actuarial practice. Um, the advent of what we've seen in the last year, and it's really been in the works, I think, since probably 2012 or 2017. The advent of the language models, which use kind of this technology called the transformer, that I don't fully appreciate, David. But what these models do is they're able to kind of take inputs of our speech and our text and give us back speech and text that looks like we're talking to someone who understands us and gives us educated responses. It's almost like having kind of someone with a fairly high IQ on the other end of your laptop, and you're able to ask them questions about general things, and they're able to give you generally smart answers about it. And so, the question, how will actuaries use this, in the future? You can imagine like a ton of uses of having, a smart assistant there. I mean, imagine taking that smart assistant, but making them a smart actuarial assistant. Allowing them to see maybe your company's historical pricing documents and valuation documents, and reading through those and being able to provide answers on kind of the current state of your company, your liabilities and your assets based on all of this past history. You don't have to go and find 15 or 30 minutes with the current valuation actuary. Instead, you can ask kind of your company's personal actuarial assistant. Um, there's other uses too, I imagine, in education. When you're having to train kind of new people coming into your company or coming into your organization. Why does the organization sort of function like it does? What sort of models do you use for this particular calculation? An assistant trained on all of the work that someone does or a company does already can hopefully easily assist new people for onboarding. And the opportunity cost is where I think a lot of the gains come, David, because currently we have a pretty much an apprenticeship model for actuaries where someone who's more senior, a mid-level or a senior manager are training the people below them, as they come up and start to fill those roles. I don't ever see the exclusion of people from this loop. I always think it's going to be important to have a human kind of training other humans, because I think that's how we learn the best. But at the same time, there's a lot of kind of crystallized knowledge that we can sort of draw from our past work that someone now can access, as if you had sort of a hyper Google, for the work specific to what you do. I mean, that's a really powerful tool.
Absolutely. Let me take a moment to remind listeners that you're listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. On this podcast, we talk to Academy volunteers and leaders, as well as friends of the Academy, about what inspires them about their work, either professionally or as an Academy volunteer. Please subscribe to Actuary Voices on your preferred podcast platform. Now, the Academy does pride itself as being the home of professionalism for the US actuarial profession. Do you see any implications in the professionalism sphere for using AI, whether that's around the code of conduct or the standards?
Sure. I think that there's probably a good list of to-dos and probably not to-dos around artificial intelligence. Um, let's kind of keep going on the example I provided of like a very smart assistant. Let's say this smart assistant was trained from the American Academy of Actuaries using 100 or 200 ethics cases that referred to actuarial code of conduct precepts that basically codified or had kind of embedded in this model a lot of the considerations that we actuaries take. Now, this is not a person. This is sort of a machine or a bot. But at the same time, it relatively it relatively understands a lot of what's going in there, and I use understands in quotation marks. And if you have kind of imagine a sticky situation as a leader of an organization or as an actuary, you can imagine kind of asking this actuarial bot, have situations like this arisen in the past, and can you offer any advice to me? Can you give me a list of things to consider? Currently we ask our mentors kind of closest to us about things like that. So from a professionalism standpoint, could this technology help us with almost direct advice? I think there's a world that it can, and I don't think we're too far away from that. At the same time, we also need to act with integrity and professionalism in our daily work. And, that includes making sure that our work product is our own, that we're representing ourselves kind of forthrightly. And to the extent that we're using artificial intelligence type models to help us or give us, certain answers. First of all, we should think about when we need to disclose that, to our audience. David, I don't suspect that you kind of disclose every time you Google search, though, to your next audience. It's sort of implied, right, that you've done a Google search about something in order to find out where it comes from. You don't say, and I used Google to do this. We all know that we did. I think eventually we'll sort of be there with some of these models. Like, of course, sort of we had a ground truth of we used a large language model or whatever they're going to be called to give us kind of a lift as a starting point. But I think we as actuaries will have to decide when it's important to kind of disclose the model we're using, and also to think about the sort of data that trained the model. There's a lot of discussion in our data as an asset working group around bias in our own actuarial models. I don't think that these large language models are devoid of bias. I know that they're not. They know that they're not. And it's our job to sort of do our best to understand, is the output that we're giving sort of does it reflect, the best use of these models, and have we made all the appropriate disclosures?
It's interesting you talk about models because obviously AI is largely a large language model, but actuaries use an awful lot of models themselves. And you refer to this a little bit in your previous answer. I remember I attended a talk a while back, and some models are considered to be black boxes, and people don't really understand what's in them, and yet some folks rely on them immensely. And the aim is to get models to become glass boxes, so you can see exactly what's going on. And do you think that current forms of AI are veering towards the former, the black box, or enable us to get towards the latter, the glass box?
At some point, what's the great quote from? It's probably the 50s, and I may have mentioned it in the article that any any suitable form of kind of technology after 1960 is basically magic. It kind of looks like that here with this technology. Right now it's very much a black box to pretty much everybody. David, is my
Hmm.
kind of take on this. To start with, OpenAI, the company that released the Chat GPT and that holds GPT-4, um, that's not a public model. There are researchers that are kind of going in and trying to find out exactly sort of what's happening within its different neural network layers, within the transformer layers. Um, but it's a they could try for decades and still not kind of fully understand, because there's something like over 1 trillion parameters that have been trained in these models. Um, it's going to be it's going to be really hard to make that anything like a completely like a glass box. At the same time, I think we are doing better and better at finding ways to understand the outputs of these models. I mentioned um, in the discussion about machine learning models that actuaries use currently, some of these SHAP values that we use to help explain the outputs, and that helps us, kind of the users of the model, judge, are these reasonable, or is the model is the model producing outputs based on something that we just don't understand, or that doesn't even make kind of sense to us? Is it predicting health by, understanding like the number of cars that your neighbor has in their driveway? It's not like something like that wouldn't be a useful input to a model, we think. Um, so I think that we're finding better and better ways to communicate the results of these models to help make it more like a glass box. At the same time, the way that we get kind of the magic out of the language models is because it's trained on so much data, and there's very, very sophisticated um, algorithms that go into kind of understanding the inputs and producing the outputs that we're never fully gonna grok.
Sure. Yeah. So it's definitely um, approach with caution, but use judiciously. But the benefits you feel are the upside is significant.
I think the upside's really significant, in particular because of the savings in kind of human cost. In other words, what's coming out of the model is something that would have taken me in discussions with someone else, you know, presumably hours to produce. And that's the promise of a lot of these technologies, is it makes things a little easier for us.
I understand you're not a member of the Actuarial Standards Board, but as a as a as a leading actuary, do you feel that our current standards are set up to deal with this new frontier?
It's an interesting question. Currently, the standards are built around our existing practice. So one question to ask might be, how did the standards evolve um, when we started using kind of the internet to search for solutions to some of our actuarial problems, to provide us kind of new sources? Did our standards evolve that much? I don't know that they did too much. I mean, they themselves had a website, but I'm not sure that um, there's a lot of new development of the standards just based on that new technology. New technology, with being able to generate a lot of new language, a lot of new content from inputs that you don't really understand where it came from, or you don't fully understand where it came from. I think in actuarial communications, ASOP 41, that's likely to be maybe the first place that some of these AI models get mentioned, David, if I was a betting person, because a lot of the communications we make, today, there's specific things that actuaries have to cite and reliances, on sources and other actuaries. And to the extent that we're creating a lot of content from, a model that produces language, we may at some point, need to disclose that.
More broadly, we've seen and read about some cases where AI models have simply made stuff up, particularly the case of a chat GPT written legal brief that simply invented case law. Is watching out for that where the human element comes in?
It's certainly something that needs to be on all of our radars that probably wasn't before. Another thing I think of kind of in this vein, David, is um, when somebody writes us an email or writes us a report, in the coming years, it's not going to be possible to know all the time if they used an artificial intelligence generated, paragraph or um, introduction. And so I think we're going to have to apply the same, quality and scrutiny lenses that we do to the work that we do today. It it may be that artificial intelligence language models are actually better at producing content than many people who write reports that we're reviewing. I think we should have the same standards for quality that we always have in our profession. That we should seek out the same peer review that we're sort of um, intended to seek out today. That we should collaborate with other actuaries to review the work that's done. Um, so none of that goes away in my mind. And in my personal professional work at my company, we're certainly uh, very aware that our quality standards have always been high and need to remain high. And there's nothing that's kind of letting down that wall, regardless of maybe the initial source or whatever drafted the initial source, if that was an analyst or a junior staffer or an AI model.
I'd like to move on a little bit from AI now, because I think one of the things that I like to discuss with visitors to Actuary Voices is what they see as challenges and opportunities for the profession writ large. And I know it's something that companies and associations are constantly thinking about. We don't have crystal balls, but we do like to think about the future. And apart from the challenges and opportunities associated with AI, what other ones do you see that you think merit some significant investigation?
Some of the challenges that I see revolve around the expanding use of data and models that we have, and the fact that a lot of the economy, a lot of companies are moving to use more and more data to assist their businesses. We as insurance, generally insurance companies and financial risk managers, we also want to use that data to give us, an advantage for our products, to reach new customers. Um, but I think as actuarial professionals, we need to be, really, really cautious about the implications of using that data. Again, we talked about biases earlier, but what biases may be in there? Um, uh, what what are the sort of appropriate uses, of models, and what are not the appropriate uses of models? We can't always rely on the current regulatory framework and even maybe the current professionalism framework to completely guide us, because um, a lot of this technology is gonna take us kind of faster than many of our kind of committees and governing bodies can keep up. So generally, David, I worry about or I'm keeping on heightened alert about the use of more and more data in all of the work that we produce. Um, the other the other thing I'd bring up is just the business model itself of training actuaries. I mentioned earlier we have something like an apprenticeship model where we continue to train new actuaries coming into the firm. Um, but we've seen a little bit of a decline at least in the life and health space, on new actuaries taking new exams, which may portend kind of fewer future new actuaries into the field. I worry about that. I worry about kind of the talent that we may be able to get as a profession, and I want to keep the quality really high so that we can continue to do great work in kind of the financial risk management industry and insurance. So those are two things that are high on my radar, David.
They both sound very important. And I would like to refer back to the first one around the use of data, because I believe you're a member of the Data Science and Analytics Committee. So you are at the coalface, so to speak, in figuring out how we should view and treat data.
That's right. The committee does a lot of great work. In particular, I've spent a lot of time volunteering with Dorothy Andrews and Dave Sandberg, past president Dave Sandberg, on um, on that committee, and making sure that, in all sorts of facets of our actuarial discipline, that we are kind of giving the appropriate consideration to, should we be using a new data source? What are the considerations that we should have when employing a particular type of model? Can we understand it? To your point earlier, is it something more like a glass box or something more like a black box? Um, and moreover, there are many states that are in the U.S. that are, latching on to this idea. Colorado comes to mind, who's indicated that they're highly on alert for how insurance companies use that data. So the fact that the academy has, this working group is, I think, really important for us as a profession.
And that segues perfectly into my final question, because I was going to ask you about volunteerism. We're currently in the midst of the Academy's annual call for volunteers, where we survey our members looking for people to volunteer for our many committees. And I was wondering if you'd say a few words about what encouraged you to become a volunteer, and why you found it so fulfilling. If that isn't putting words in your mouth.
The thing that encouraged me to be a volunteer is the work of other volunteers. What I love to see is a bunch of kind of my smart colleagues from around the industry sitting together and talking about the deep issues that we face as a profession. That's true in the data science working group. It's been true in the other groups that I've participated in. Um, the idea that we kind of get together and tackle and put down kind of formal thoughts on how we view the issues of the day. I think that's critical to our profession and the professionalism that you mentioned. So it is the work of other volunteers that really makes the biggest impression on me. And that trickles down, by the way, to most or all working actuaries. So there, like you said, there's 5 actuaries in everybody's life they don't know about. But even in every actuary's life, there's probably 5 or 10 volunteers that they don't know about that produced, a particular standard, or a particular working paper. So that's what inspires me, David.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Robert, we're getting close to the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I love the anecdote that you gave about the 5 actuaries, and you attributed it to someone else, and I'm forgetting their name. But I love that anecdote, and I'd encourage everybody to go out and share that, and encourage all of their friends at the cocktail party to think about the 5 actuaries that are in their life. I think that that's a great way to sort of understand the impact that actuaries have on, everyday people in our lives that don't interact with insurance that much. I think that's really really cool. So thank you for sharing that, David.
Sure. That was, Audrey Halverson, former Academy board member, told me that. Perfect. So I will make sure that I pass on your kind words about her insights. Robert, I want to thank you very, very much for your time today. I very much appreciate it. I very much appreciate your work as a volunteer for the Academy. And long may it continue.
Thank you. This has been a delight, David. I really appreciate your having me on.
Today, I was speaking with Robert Eaton, a longtime Academy volunteer who has written on AI for Contingencies magazine. You can check out his writing at contingencies.org. We will be having a number of sessions on artificial intelligence at our annual meeting in Vision tomorrow in November. Find out more at actuary.org. My name is David Nolan, and I'm the host of Actuary Voices, a podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Please visit our website, actuary.org, for a wealth of information about the work that the Academy does. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. And of course, please subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast platform.